Chesterfield 3, Fleetwood Town 0. Back to winning ways for the SPIREITES on Saturday, and maybe back in with half a chance of gate crashing the playoff party late in the day as well. We're going to dive into all that very, very soon, but before we do, just a quick apology on behalf of myself for the lack of a video kind of towards the back end of last week, kind of looking ahead to that Fleetwood game, and of course also looking back on the Gillingham game, the 1-1 draw. That kind of preceded that in midweek as well. I did have some time put aside to try and put something together on Friday ahead of that Fleetwood game, but unfortunately kind of hay fever and seasonal allergies and things like that gave me a little bit of a battering, so I don't think it'd be a particularly pleasant viewing experience or a particularly pleasant recording experience for me either, and I'm sure people who've experienced that kind of thing kind of know how these things can go. Back to reasonable fitness now though, and hopefully that will remain the case for these final 4 games of the season, of course, really into crunch time for Chesterfield. Now, of course, things are looking a little bit different with the Easter schedule. Of course, games on Good Friday and Easter Monday, so there will probably just be kind of one bumper video looking ahead to those games against AFC Wimbledon and Bradford City for Chesterfield, probably on Thursday, and then kind of looking back at those 2 games on the Tuesday or Wednesday after that as well. That is the rough plan at the moment, at least, but the best way to keep up with any changes on that or kind of anything, if you're interested when I'm not actively on YouTube, or probably either Twitter or Blue Sky, and of course all links to my relevant social medias will be down as always in the description below. But the boring admin stuff out of the way, let's dive in to having a look at this game. Big game for Chesterfield, big result for Chesterfield, and start where we always do by having a look at their starting 11. And when I was kind of planning that potential video that never ultimately happened, looking ahead to the Fleetwood Town game, this was probably something like the starting 11 I would have personally landed on. So it's typical, really, that the one time I would have been reasonably close in my prediction for the 11 is the one time a video never ultimately came to fruition. It's kind of the way these things go, unfortunately. It wasn't particularly close with my prediction for the Gillingham 11, and then the video that never made it out was the one where I was a little bit closer. So there we are. But yeah, I suppose that kind of prompts the big question. What is it about this 11 and setup that is appealing not only to me, but definitely more consequentially to Paul Cook, and how did it play out on the pitch and contribute to Chesterfield getting such a big result? And for me, the big thing to talk about in terms of this is balance. I think this starting 11 has a really nice balance, and we're going to try and talk about all of the kind of interconnecting pieces that really make this tick. But I think there's a lovely balance to this team. There are some fresh injury concerns that probably means we won't see this exact 11 again, particularly for the probably next couple of games, but maybe even for the rest of the season. But we will get into that a little bit later. But if Chesterfield can maintain something like this, I think it could be very, very exciting for these last 4 games of the campaign. So we'll start on the right-hand side, I think, because you've got Michael Olakigbe playing on the wing, and then Liam Mandeville filling in, as he's done over the past few weeks since the losses of Janoy Dinassian and Raheem Shackelford, filling in at right back. And when we spoke, kind of looking back in the video, looking back at the Tranmere game and looking ahead to the Gillingham game, we spoke about how Michael Olakigbe against Carlisle, in the second half at least, and against Tranmere, had been moved over to the left. And that created a little bit of a vacuum, really, on the right for Chesterfield. Kind of no true wide presence there. Of course, you had Ollie Banks playing on this right side, and even Tom Naylor at times playing there as well, of course, with Liam Mandeville, as we've said, at right back. But that kind of left no true overlapping or wide threat there, and it did, particularly in that Tranmere game, kind of lead to some attacks stalling out. So that was always going to be an interesting conundrum. Looking ahead to that Gillingham game, we suggested maybe that Vontae Daly-Campbell could be a solution there, kind of offering that more overlapping option from right back. That's not the route Chesterfield ultimately chose. What they did choose to do was move Olakigbe back to the right, kind of bringing up this right-hand side that we said could be an interesting partnership to look to build on after that Carlisle game. First, achieving that by bringing in Dylan Duffy on the left wing, and then it was Ryan Colclough who put in a great cameo off the bench against Gillingham, getting an assist, possibly could, and arguably should, have got a winning goal in that game as well, who earned the start against Fleetwood. Sorry, so many different games because of the quick turnaround and all the videos we've done and all the conversations we've had trying to get it all together. But it was Fleetwood, this most recent one. Ryan Colclough getting the start and rewarding Paul Cook for that selection with getting a goal, getting himself on the score sheet this time. So I think this really works because, as we've said, it gives you that proper, genuine threat out wide in Olakipe, and then what that then allows is it allows Mandeville to drift inside, and particularly to drift into this kind of right-hand half space here. And one of the frustrations for me when this kind of, obviously with Duffy and for Colclough, but a similar idea in terms of the system, was that Mandeville wasn't quite bombing on into that space as much as you would want, and it was Paddy Madden that actually played as the 10 in that game against Gillingham, or at least started there. And that left Madden with a lot to do. Kind of Chesterfield really struggling to kind of access that central area, really. And I think a lot of that was because Mandeville, and you can understand it, trying to stay a little bit more reserved off of that defensive protection, but it left a bit of a shortage of bodies, I think, in the middle of the pitch for Chesterfield. Particularly in the first half, but once they'd gone behind, and obviously that was such a big game, needing one goal, arguably we're probably targeting 2 goals and a win from that game. They did start to push Mandeville that little bit further forward, and I think we saw the benefits of it, and I think we absolutely saw the benefits of it in this game against Fleetwood, where he was a lot more aggressive and attacking from the off. And what I like so much about this little detail and tweak from Chesterfield is that it basically gets Mandeville into the positions of the pitch that you want him. Because yes, he's starting out of position if you look at the team sheet and look at where he's actually playing in terms of playing as that right back. But if you can get him in and invert him into this right-hand half space, that's basically where we would play if he was playing as a winger, kind of tucking in a little bit, or playing as the number 10. So it's platforming him in the places on the pitch where he's going to have the most kind of impact and play, probably, or at least kind of theoretically, his best football. So very, very kind of encouraged to see that from a Chesterfield perspective. Getting him into those positions, even when he's playing out of position, you're still giving him the opportunity to be creative, to get involved in attacks, to play well, to be the best asset and the most valuable, offer the most value rather to the team that he could be. Kind of stumbled through that point at the end, but I think you can kind of gather the point there, in that getting Mandeville into these high positions is a big, big plus. Gives you more numbers attacking, opens up the pitch more, kind of particularly opens up the central areas more by giving you this midfield box. Obviously, if you've got these 2 wide players to then isolate the wide men, actually go and past them. And yes, I can understand people's frustrations at certain times with Michael Olakipe. I think he does definitely need to improve his output in the final third that little bit. But just having somebody out there that can stand a man up and has the ability to take a man out, and even if he doesn't quite get it right every time, I think is absolutely massive. And with Colclough on the other side as well, I think that really opens up the pitch. Having that extra player in there and then the 2 players out wide, I think this is a very nice setup for Chesterfield to have. What I think it then also allows is it allows you to have this defensive midfield pivot of John Fleck and Jensen Metcalf, which again, after that Carlisle game, is a partnership that we kind of identified as one that could be interesting, one to look out for. And yes, again, kind of when we were talking about that Gillingham game, we did say, could Tom Naylor maybe come in? But because you've got Mandeville occupying that higher space, you then maybe don't need somebody who is quite as aggressive as Tom Naylor in making those kind of aggressive, kind of box-crashing runs. Of course, Metcalf definitely does still try and get forward. In fact, he probably had one of Chesterfield's best chances in the first half against Fleetwood, an effort that bent just wide. But he's not necessarily going to pursue those runs as aggressively as Naylor, so he can stay that little bit deeper with Mandeville taking up this space in front of him and kind of forming this really, really nice complementary partnership with John Fleck, who I thought both of them were very, very good again in this game. Maybe a couple of wayward passes from Fleck, but also a couple that were absolutely brilliant. And again, I think when you've got players with those abilities, you want to platform them. So yes, even if they are going to make mistakes, a bit like Olakipe, really, yes, he might not beat his man every time, but you want to give them the freedom to do what they do best. And I think this is what, again, I kind of going back over Olga, but I think this is what this team does. It gives everybody kind of the opportunity to do what they do best. The 2 wingers, the 2 defensive midfield players, obviously Metcalf can kind of float and get involved, drop a little bit deeper, get in the build-up, maybe breaking things up as well. Fleck can kind of operate and dictate things from deep. Dobra and Mandeville can buzz around in these half spaces, which they've done so well. I think this season, you think back to when Chesterfield were going through a little bit of an injury crisis, and they were both playing really as midfielders in a 4-3-3. They were pushing for, bombing on, getting into these half spaces. I think this is where those 2 thrive the best. Of course, Dobra has now been lost, and early signs don't sound good. Not sure, as far as I'm aware, and as far as last I'd seen going into the recording of this video, we haven't had a firm update on how long that's likely to be. But in any case, it's a massive loss for Chesterfield. But looking at this setup, I think it's a really, really encouraging one from Chesterfield. And I think what really allowed them to kick on in this game, just going back to, obviously, we're talking a lot about kind of the bigger picture and what this could open up going forward. But going back to this game, just for a second, the big moment came from Ryan Colclough. I think because it'd been a little bit of a frustrating first half for Chesterfield. They'd had a lot of the ball, not necessarily creating a massive amount with it. And it was a similar story, as we've said. With Olakibe kind of struggling against his man, it definitely was something kind of also true of Dylan Duffy in that Gillingham game, and kind of a similar story here for Chesterfield's wingers against Fleetwood. They were getting in some good positions, playing some nice football, and they just couldn't quite either get past their man or get that final pass right. But what we saw from Ryan Colclough, as the game was drifting a little bit, as it looked like it could be drifting towards another draw, he showed some great determination. He could have lost the ball again up against two Fleetwood defenders, but made sure he battled his way through, got in, and then kind of applied a lovely finish into the bottom corner. That really opened the game up, and really Fleetwood probably from that point probably had a little bit more chances and more territory, more possession than they did in the first half. So it's probably more of a dominant first half in terms of those metrics for Chesterfield in the second, where they scored 3 goals. But what it did is it really opened the game up and gave them a chance and some space, more importantly, to really drive home those kind of advantages and those nice bits of play that initially were breaking down. So I think we saw the value there of getting that first goal, getting out in front. It's so crucial, because otherwise, particularly when you're playing at home, you've got teams that can dig in, and they've got 2 goals to play with, basically, in terms of holding on to get at least a point. But when you get out in front, that initially immediately flips the onus back onto the away side, in this case Fleetwood, to come out and play that a little bit more. And I think Chesterfield were then able to hammer home their advantage with the extra goals coming from Ash Palmer and Paddy Madden. So yes, there's some fresh dilemmas kind of in terms of what you're going to do if Dobra is unavailable, which it certainly sounds like he could be. Obviously, from a Chesterfield perspective, you would hope for brighter news, but the initial signs, by all accounts, aren't necessarily that great. So maybe some dilemmas there, but otherwise, particularly with a bit of a longer break, of course, not the full week, but 6 days going into this game on Good Friday, after such a positive result, I think where you can, you keep things the same, and I think you kind of build round this template for the remainder of the season if you can. And Chesterfield will hope that they are afforded that look. Haven't necessarily had that. Sometimes it looks like they've got something going, and then the injuries have taken hold, and you have to throw everything away and start again. They'll hope for a little bit more of a settled period going into this final 4 games, where they still do have something to play for. Because yeah, it kind of looked, and personally, in my opinion, I thought that draw against Gillingham, that might have been it. The gap was 6 points with 5 to play. Not mathematically over, of course, but that kind of creates very little margin for error, and there still is. But by getting a win here, Grimsby rather, all the G's, apologies. Grimsby dropping points against Harrogate. That's cut the gap down to 4 points, maybe just that little bit of extra pressure now. And Chesterfield, again, there is still going to be a lot to do. You think they're going to need an absolute minimum 10 points. They might even need to win all 4 games to get into those playoffs. But from where they were kind of at the start of March, where they lost 4 games in a row, they were, I think, 13 points, I think it was, even with games in hand. It didn't look like they were going to win those games in hand because they were on such poor form, and 13 points looked a massive gap to the playoffs. The fact that they've still got something to play for, when it looked like they could be at one point 10 to 12 games really, where they'd have very little of consequence to play for. The fact they're probably going to take it down to the last 2 or 3 games at worst, I think is a very it's just a more interesting scenario really. Even if Chesterfield don't make it, I don't think. And of course, you're gonna go whether you're a Chesterfield fan or fan of any team, you're gonna go and you're gonna support your team in every game. But I think we all want to go to matches where there's something on the line. So the fact that it does look like that's going to be the case for Chesterfield pretty much to the end of the season is some good fun, and I'm very much looking forward to seeing how these final 4 games unfold and see just how far Chesterfield can take this potential playoff run. So yes, if you want to keep up with all that, as I say, apologies for missing a couple of videos recently. As I say, bit of a hectic schedule. Personally, a bit of a hectic schedule in terms of the football, and some good old-fashioned illness getting in the way as well. But hopefully now we should be back, and it should be a very interesting remainder of the season. So if you want to keep up with all that, stick right here on this channel. And of course, any support in terms of likes, subscriptions, sharing these videos elsewhere will be massively, massively appreciated. But otherwise, thank you very, very much for watching this video. If you have enjoyed it, as I say, any support will be massively, massively appreciated. And I should see you a little bit later this week to look ahead to what is going to be a make or break, you would imagine, Easter weekend for Chesterfield, and possibly for their opponents in AFC Wimbledon and Bradford as well. So much on the line at this stage of the season. It is absolutely brilliant. It's what we all watch this sport for, and I absolutely cannot wait to talk about it. So yes, come back here towards the end of this week, and all being well, we should have another video out. But for this one, that is it. So thank you very, very much, and I'll see you very, very soon. Thank you very, very much. Goodbye.